From today, you're living with us. We'll make you our maid. Don't you guys get it? My name is Lucy Miller. I live with my husband, Sam. We have a great relationship, one that others often envy. I thought I had a good relationship with my in-laws too, but lately, things have been getting a bit tense. I considered talking to Sam about it, but didn't want to worry him, so I decided to wait and see. How about we go somewhere on our next day off? Sam suggested during dinner, and I got excited about the idea. Sure. The constant rain lately has been a downer. The forecast says it'll be sunny on our next day off, so it'd be nice to go somewhere for a change. We started discussing where to go, throwing around various ideas. We finally decided to do some sightseeing in the morning, have a special dinner at a specially reserved seat with a great view, and come back in the evening. Looking forward to our day off, I worked hard until then. Finally, the day arrived. We had everything prepared the day before and were about to leave when Sam's phone rang. Oh, it's Mom. Hello? It seemed like a call from his mother. I wondered what it could be about, and then Sam's tone changed. What? Got it. Lucy and I will be there right away. Hearing those words, I knew something had happened. I asked Sam, and he said his father had collapsed. We rushed to the hospital. As we were about to ask the receptionist where to go, we heard his mother's voice, "Oh, you got here quickly." Turning around, we saw his father sitting in the waiting room with her. Sam and I exchanged glances and asked if his father was okay. "Oh, it was just a slipped disc." "It gave us quite a scare," his mother said with a laugh. Relieved it wasn't serious, Sam and I sat down, feeling a bit deflated. We had rushed to the hospital thinking it was a big emergency, and now this. We had even cancelled our day trip for this. I felt a wave of irritation rising. When I looked at Sam, he seemed just as frustrated. "Can you give us a ride home? We came here by taxi." "We can drive you back, but didn't you say he collapsed?" "He was in so much pain he couldn't move. I was so shocked I called a taxi right away." "I see." After dropping off his parents at their house, Sam and I talked about whether we could still go on our trip. His mother overheard us and asked where we were planning to go. When we told her we had plans, she said it was inconsiderate to go out while his father was suffering from a slipped disc. I couldn't understand why she called us inconsiderate in this situation, and my anger began to boil over. I wondered if they just wanted to ruin our plans, as it felt like harassment. Sam and I exchanged glances and decided to head home, but we couldn't refuse when they asked us to help with house chores. So, we spent the day helping out at his parents' house. Sam apologized, but it wasn't his fault, so I smiled and said we'd go another time. After finishing the chores, we headed home. Once we got back, Sam and I talked about how quickly the day had passed, and we decided to order takeout for dinner. I couldn't hold back my frustration from the day and spoke to Sam. "Hey. I thought your mom and dad were really rude today." Sam seemed to feel the same way and nodded vigorously. "Yeah, I started to feel like they were deliberately messing with us, and it made me really angry." We vented our frustrations to each other and felt a bit better afterward. Sam suggested that we make up for today on our next day off, and I started looking forward to our next break again. However, on our next day off, and the one after that, Sam's parents kept calling us with requests, preventing us from going out. I was thinking they would call again next week when Sam sat down beside me on the couch. "I told my parents we have plans and won't be reachable on our next day off. So, we're definitely going out next time." I was happy to hear that from Sam, but I wondered if his parents really agreed to it. Knowing Sam, he probably decided to go ahead with our plans even if his parents didn't agree, thinking about me. But I didn't want any conflicts between Sam and his parents. I also didn't want to add to Sam's worries. "Are you sure?" I asked Sam, and he replied with a mischievous smile. "Lately, I've felt sad that we haven't had much time together. It's okay to refuse once in a while." I was thrilled at the thought of finally going on a date with Sam and hugged him. But then we realized how naive we were. The night before our next day off. Hey there! Sam's parents suddenly showed up at our house. When Sam asked what was going on, they said it would be nice to stay over sometimes and suggested we go out together the next day. When Sam tried to refuse by saying, "I told you we have plans for tomorrow," they insisted we could handle it together and asked what exactly our plans were. Sam sighed awkwardly and said we had been planning to spend the day together because we hadn't had much couple time lately. Then his parents suggested they join us. Well, I'd love to eat something delicious. And I wanted to go shopping too. Let's go to the mall. Sounds good. I've been thinking about getting a new pillow. The mall, huh? It was completely different from our plans. Sam tried to refuse, but we knew his parents wouldn't back down. Reluctantly, I agreed, and Sam apologized to me. Honestly, I was furious that they changed our plans for their own convenience. I almost suggested that they should go by themselves if they wanted to, but I held back. All I could do was sigh. I'm really sorry. Sigh. When will we ever get to enjoy a nice day trip? It's okay. Besides, I thought of something. Since our trips always get ruined by your parents on weekends, let's both take a day off during the week and go then. Oh, that's a great idea. Sam and I got excited about our plan while talking in the bedroom, and we decided to spend the next day with his parents. The next day came. We went to the mall as his parents wanted, but their shopping took surprisingly long. On top of that, whenever they decided on something they wanted, they asked Sam or me to buy it for them. We hadn't expected this, and both Sam and I were troubled. It would have been okay if the things they wanted were cheap, but they were asking for things worth hundreds of dollars as if it was nothing. I thought this must have been their real motive and wondered how much longer they planned to drag us around. I was beyond angry and just felt exhausted. What do they think we are? When we refused, saying we couldn't afford it, his parents got in a bad mood. Reluctantly, we ended up buying them one item each, but since they didn't get everything they wanted, they were in a bad mood by the time we left. After dropping his parents off at their house, Sam and I collapsed onto the couch at home, feeling utterly exhausted. They weren't like this before. What happened all of a sudden? I wonder if something happened. Well, at least they're healthy, so let's try to think positively. Although I was very frustrated with my in-laws, but because they were Sam's parents, I knew that if I spoke my mind, it would trouble him, so I kept my complaints to myself and tried to stay positive, not wanting to worry him. That night, both Sam and I fell asleep much earlier than usual due to exhaustion. From then on, his parents called us frequently, and the time Sam and I had to relax together gradually decreased. One day, I noticed Sam didn't look well and suggested he go to the hospital, but he refused, saying he was fine. Still worried, I started paying more attention to preparing healthy meals and took over all the household chores we used to share. Sam gave me an apologetic smile and said, "I'm sorry." But he seemed off, so I decided to take him to the hospital against his will. While we were at the hospital for his checkup, Sam suddenly collapsed. My blood ran cold, and I rushed to hold him up. The doctor immediately gave instructions to the nurse, and the examination room became chaotic. My body trembling, I had no choice but to follow as Sam was being taken away. I could feel my heart pounding and the color draining from my face. He'll get better soon, right? He'll be okay, right? I kept telling myself over and over. After a while, Sam woke up. He looked a little better, which was a relief, but then the doctor told him to get a thorough examination. Sam said it was an overreaction, but I was so worried that I persuaded him to go through with it. He reluctantly agreed. Because of his collapse, he was admitted to the hospital and scheduled for an examination the next day. I went home to gather some clothes and other necessities. I also contacted Sam's workplace to explain the situation. Sam, who was well regarded at his workplace for his good character, received a lot of concern from his colleagues. They told me to let him rest and not worry about work, offering their kind support. When I contacted my own workplace and explained the situation, they were understanding and allowed me to take some time off. The results of the thorough examination revealed that Sam didn't have much time left. Hearing this, I felt like my mind went blank and I froze. My heart raced and it became hard to breathe. My body trembled uncontrollably. I wanted to believe this was just a nightmare brought on by my anxiety and not reality. The doctor continued to speak, but I couldn't hear anything. Sam was gonna stay in the hospital for treatment. Surprisingly, he seemed to accept his situation rather quickly. They say time heals all wounds, but I wondered if I would ever come to terms with my feelings. I stayed with him every day during his hospitalization. I explained the situation to both our workplaces. When explaining the situation, I forced out words I didn't want to say, feeling like my throat was closing up. Both workplaces were understanding and granted us leave until things settled down. When I informed his parents, they rushed to the hospital. Surprisingly, they seemed genuinely concerned about Sam, but when I left the room to buy some snacks from the shop, they followed me. Whose name is the house under? How much is the inheritance if he's gone? I was shocked by my in-laws' words and couldn't help but glare at them. I almost slapped them. Don't say such ominous things. He might still recover. We were just a little worried, that's all. Realizing their insensitivity, they looked awkward. Yet, they didn't hesitate to put whatever they wanted into my basket without offering to pay. With a sigh, I reluctantly paid for everything. From then on, they started visiting the hospital daily. At first, they settled for snacks from the shop, but gradually they began asking for money. Their reason was that they were spending a lot on transportation to visit out of concern and were having to take time off work more frequently. I told them they didn't need to come every day since I was always there, but they got upset, claiming they were worried. Seeing this, Sam apologized to me, but I didn't want to burden him any further, so I smiled and told him that everything was perfectly fine. I realized that arguing with his parents would only stress him more and potentially worsen his condition, so I tried to accommodate their demands as much as possible. However, they acted as if they were entitled to everything and never showed any gratitude, making me sometimes doubt if they were really his parents. They seemed to notice that I wouldn't refuse their requests in front of Sam and started making their demands in his presence. I thought their behavior was despicable, but my priority was his health and mental well-being, so I forced myself to smile and meet their demands, no matter how much it pained me. It's common courtesy to offer before we even have to ask, you know? For a moment, I almost lost my temper at my mother-in-law's words, but I held myself back. Hearing such an unreasonable person lecture me on common courtesy made my anger boil over at their sheer audacity. If this continues, I'm gonna break from the stress. I guess. Wasn't I considerate enough? Well, I guess you're just not the type of daughter-in-law who thinks of these things. I'll let it slide for now. What exactly is their idea of common courtesy? I was utterly fed up. Even though I was holding it together for my husband's sake, I was on the verge of exploding with anger, struggling to keep myself in check. I wondered if it was finally time to speak up and looked at my in-laws with a cold stare. After a while, Sam passed away. Meeting you made my life a huge success. Thank you for your immense love and happiness. Those were his last words. I couldn't get his final smile out of my head. I couldn't believe he was gone, but after the funeral and everything had settled, I walked into the now silent house, and it suddenly hit me. I collapsed at the entrance, sobbing. The happy days with Sam kept replaying in my mind, along with memories of us laughing together. The sadness was so overwhelming that I even thought it might be easier to follow him. Mixed emotions swirled within me, and I found myself wanting to blame him for leaving me behind. My face was a mess of tears, and by the time I noticed, it was already dark outside. With my tears dried up, I wandered into the living room. Sitting on the couch, memories flooded my mind again. I could almost hear Sam calling out to me, "Lucy." I thought maybe keeping busy would help, so I decided to sort through the belongings I had brought back from the hospital. As I rummaged through the bag, I found an envelope hidden inside. Curious, I opened it and found a letter from Sam. To Lucy. By the time you read this, I'll probably be gone. I never thought I'd be writing something like this. I'm sorry I couldn't stay by your side. If our roles were reversed, I'd be devastated. So I imagine you're very sad right now. But I'll always be watching over you. I want you to know you're not alone. There's so much I want to thank you for, more than I can write here, but thank you for staying by my side. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for loving me. I was so happy to spend my life with you. Tears I thought had dried up began to pour out again as I realized he didn't want to leave any more than I wanted him to. The one who was probably the most frustrated was Sam himself. I had been so overwhelmed with my own feelings that I hadn't considered Sam's. The letter had marks that looked like dried tears, showing that Sam had cried while writing it. He had given me so much. Dwelling on what I had lost wouldn't help me move forward. I hugged the letter and resolved to be strong. Part of the letter also said, "I'm sorry my parents have been such a burden," and I realized that I had been worrying him all along. I couldn't let him keep worrying about me even after he was gone, so I slapped my cheeks to pull myself together. I faced the altar and spoke to Sam. "Thank you for the letter. I'll live strongly, so please watch over me." Thanks to Sam's letter, I felt a bit more energized and contacted friends and colleagues who had been worried about me. I gathered my resolve once more. After a slightly extended break, I returned to work, feeling more positive than I had expected. When I arrived, my colleagues were very concerned, but I thanked them and got to work on the tasks that had piled up. During the next long weekend, I decided to visit my parents. When I arrived at my parents' house, they welcomed me with smiles, and even without words, I could tell they had been worried about me. Since I had taken some paid holidays, I spent a few days relaxing at my parents' house, which helped me unwind. I told them I'd visit again soon and returned home on the last day of the long weekend, only to find my house was gone. To my disbelief, my home had been demolished. I couldn't believe my eyes and wondered if I had come to the wrong place. But that wasn't the case, and I felt my mind go blank. As I stood there in shock, I heard a familiar voice. "Oh, you're finally back." I turned to see my in-laws standing there. At that moment, I realized they were behind this. "What is going on?" Suppressing the anger bubbling up, I asked, and my father-in-law responded with a laugh. "From today, you're living with us. We'll make you our maid. And don't forget to cover our living expenses too." My in-laws had destroyed my home just to make me their maid. My anger reached its peak, and I confronted them. "What have you done? This was mine and Sam's home. Your house is our house too. You don't need it since you're moving in with us. We moved the altar to our place, so there's no problem." Their outrageous logic left me speechless. I became convinced, once again, that these people only cared about themselves. Their son had just passed away not too long ago, and yet they seemed to feel nothing. I felt sorry for Sam but couldn't help but feel contempt for them. I completely lost any affection I had for my in-laws. When we first got married, I wanted to treat my husband's parents well, but if they're gonna be this unreasonable, it doesn't matter whether they're family or strangers. I won't hold back with people like this anymore. The only reason I put up with them was for Sam's sake. "Are you so thrilled about becoming our maid that you can't speak? Make sure to cook us gourmet meals every day. You can even remodel the house if you want." Thinking I was in shock and unable to respond, my in-laws continued to taunt me. "How did you manage to get the house demolished? You shouldn't have been able to do it without permission." "Oh, we had an old friend take care of it. We've known him for years, so he agreed right away," my in-laws said, laughing. I couldn't help but laugh at my in-laws' condescending attitude and words. Ha ha ha. These people know nothing at all. They don't realize they're not in any position to be saying such things. What's so funny? Have you lost your mind? What's so amusing? After laughing, I confronted them with the reality. Don't you guys get it? The house you destroyed was mine. You demolished it without the owner's permission. Are you prepared to take responsibility? My in-laws looked stunned at my words. They thought the house was still in Sam's name, but he had changed it to my name while he was in the hospital, thinking about what might happen.
No way! You're lying!
Yeah. It was supposed to be in our son's name. We'll sue you for defamation. My in-laws refused to believe me and insisted that I was lying. So, I showed them a photo of the house deed in my name. Seeing it, they panicked. One of the reasons I had returned to my parents' house this time was for this very purpose. Considering the possibility of my in-laws entering the house without permission, I had taken the deed and other important items to my parents' house for safekeeping. Since I wouldn't have them on hand, I took photos of the documents just in case. Even then, they tried to insist it didn't matter because I was their daughter-in-law. However, this was something Sam and I had anticipated and discussed. We're no longer related. I've filed a termination of familial relationship document. They seemed confused by the term termination of familial relationship document, and I could almost see the question marks floating above their heads. When I explained what the document meant, they were stunned. So, we're strangers now. Don't think you can get away with destroying someone else's house.
No, it can't be.
Reality hit them, and they turned pale. My father-in-law had even quit his job, expecting me to take care of them. Such reckless behavior.
Then what are we supposed to do about living expenses?
My father-in-law started to panic, and my mother-in-law glared at me with frustration. So, I decided to tell them one more thing. Oh, since I don't have a place to live anymore, you two need to move out of the house you're living in, I said, and my in-laws were outraged. They started shouting that I was trying to take their home even though I had said we were no longer related. My mother-in-law was furiously threatening to sue me over it. They seemed to think they would win and get money if they sued, so their attitude became even more arrogant. However, that's not what I meant. The house you're living in is also in my name.
What?
The house they were living in was originally purchased under Sam's name, but he had transferred it to me as well. There was a moment of silence. As I sighed, my mother-in-law got angry.
How dare you sigh at us? You're looking down on us. That's defamation.
As I looked at them with disbelief, wondering what they were talking about, the commotion drew our neighbors outside. Sam and I had a good relationship with our neighbors, and many of them had attended his funeral. The neighbors, concerned, asked what was going on. When I explained that my house had been demolished, they were appalled. One after another, the neighbors began to criticize my in-laws. Feeling overwhelmed by the multiple accusations, my in-laws hastily left the scene. After thanking the neighbors, they assured me I could rely on them anytime, which was very comforting. I realized once again how blessed I was to have such good relationships with people in the community where Sam and I had lived. Since my house was gone and I had lost all my belongings, I quickly went shopping for clothes and essential items. My work laptop had also been in the house, so I contacted my boss to explain the situation. They assured me that the company would provide a new laptop for me. And the company decided to consult a lawyer and consider filing a claim for damages against my in-laws. When I apologized for the inconvenience, my boss reassured me that it wasn't my fault and encouraged me to reach out if I needed any help, offering supportive words. After finishing my shopping, I rented a room at a business hotel near my workplace until I could find a new place to live. However, when I went to work the next day, my boss called me in and gave me a very welcome proposal to stay in a company apartment to save on hotel expenses until I found a permanent place to live. I gratefully accepted the offer. That evening, I moved into the company apartment with my few belongings and felt relieved to find it fully furnished with everything I needed. As I was thinking about my next steps, my phone rang. I looked at my phone screen and saw my mother-in-law's name. I answered immediately. Have you decided when you'll be moving out? As soon as I said that, she flew into a rage.
You're heartless. Don't you realize you're putting us in a tough spot?
I told her in exasperation that they were the ones lacking any sense of decency. I confronted her, asking how she could say such things after demolishing our house without permission. She shouted back she didn't care about that. As I was about to respond, Wondering what kind of logic she was following, my mother-in-law said something outrageous.
If you apologize now, I'll forgive you. And you should start sending us money regularly. Even if we're no longer related, you owe us for everything we've done for you.
Hearing that left me speechless. Owe them? What is she talking about? I let out a deep sigh. As I recalled all the trouble they caused and how much I endured, my blood boiled. I was about to refuse, but then I thought of something. All right.
I won't send you money, but I'll repay you in another way.
My mother-in-law started yelling because I said I wouldn't send money.
Your father-in-law quit his job, so we don't have any money. How are we supposed to live without your support? That's not my problem. He quit on his own.
My calm response must have frustrated her greatly because she handed the phone to my father-in-law.
Don't you have any decency to care for your in-laws? No, as I've said many times, we're not related anymore. Honestly, I'd like to cut ties completely, but you need to take responsibility for demolishing my house. That's the only reason I haven't done it yet, I said. My father-in-law fell silent, and I could hear my mother-in-law yelling in the background.
This is karma, I thought, unable to suppress a laugh. Feeling pity for them and thinking I never want to become like that, I heard my mother-in-law's voice again. So what kind of repayment are you talking about? Oh, I'll sell you that house. Or I can rent it to you for about $2,000 a month, I said. She fell silent. They finally understood the consequences of living in a house that wasn't in their name. After a moment of frustration, she hung up the phone. After hanging up, I decided to leave everything to the lawyer. I considered demolishing my in-laws' house, but Sam's altar is currently there. That is the one thing I absolutely want to retrieve. A few days later, the company referred me to a lawyer, who immediately began working on my case. Then I got another call from my mother-in-law.
How dare you involve a lawyer?
I've handed everything over to my lawyer, so please refrain from contacting me directly. Goodbye.
Wait, you.
I hung up the phone without hesitation. When she started sending emails, I forwarded them all to the lawyer. After that, my in-laws stopped contacting me directly. However, they were being uncooperative with the lawyer, refusing to communicate and claiming they had the right to remain silent. The lawyer, looking troubled, gave a wry smile and told me it might take a while. I hadn't expected things to go smoothly, so I was prepared for a long battle. I explained that I had no intention of backing down. The lawyer also assured me that I didn't need to back down and encouraged me to stay strong. A few days later, my in-laws, frustrated by not being able to contact me directly, stormed into my workplace.
Where is she?
They barged in with an angry look, and as soon as they spotted me, they approached with faces like demons. Their appearance was a mess, with dirty clothes and disheveled hair. My colleagues were horrified when they saw them. However, seeing them heading straight toward me, my colleagues who knew the situation quickly stepped in to stop my in-laws. They brushed off my colleagues' attempts to stop them and marched straight toward me.
Give us money now. Don't you feel anything seeing us like this?
I've already refused.
Sam must be crying in the afterlife, thinking about how heartless you are. Huh?
Mentioning Sam's name made my blood boil. I couldn't tolerate these shameless people, who had the audacity to barge into my workplace to extort money, using Sam as a shield. In my anger, I slammed my desk. My in-laws flinched.
Yes, he's probably crying. Crying over what pathetic parents he had.
What did you say?
How can you say that with a straight face? Even while Sam was in the hospital, all you did was ask for money and things. Sam did everything for you and fulfilled his duty as a son. And this is how you repay him?
I yelled, and they took a step back. My colleagues started whispering, and my in-laws were met with cold stares. As they, visibly shaken, were about to retort, someone else walked in. Oh, could these be the people who destroyed our computer? My boss walked over with a smile and greeted them. Hello. I'm a manager in the company. I've heard about your situation. You demolished her house without permission and damaged our computer in the process. We're currently discussing this with our lawyer, and you'll be receiving a claim for damages soon. Just so you know." My boss kept smiling, but it was a scary smile.
What? Why is this happening to us?
Realizing they were at a disadvantage after seeing the reactions around them and hearing my boss's words, my in-laws quickly left the office. Afterward, he and his colleagues expressed their concern and I apologized for the trouble. They reassured me and offered kind words of support. Eventually, I received a report from the lawyer that my in-laws reluctantly agreed to move out of the house. They also agreed to pay substantial damages for the unauthorized demolition of my house. When they signed the agreement, they seemed completely defeated. A few days later, I was able to retrieve Sam's altar. However, since it was my in-laws' house to have lived in, I didn't want to live there, so I decided to put it up for sale. After that, I began discussions with the home builder who had helped us before, planning to build a new house in the same spot where the demolished house once stood. Last time, we built a 2-story house, but this time I planned to build a 1-story house. I was enjoying planning the new house, thinking about placing Sam's altar in a sunny room and maybe getting a dog and making the yard spacious. But just as I was enjoying my days, another incident occurred. One day, I got a call from my mom. "Hello? Hi, Lucy? We've got a bit of a problem here." "What happened?" According to my mom, my in-laws had stormed into my parents' house, demanding money and shouting, "Your daughter kicked us out. You need to take responsibility." As soon as I heard this, I got ready to leave and told my mom to call the police immediately. But she said my dad was talking to them, so she would call the police if necessary and then hung up. Worried about my parents, I hurried to my family home. When I arrived, I could hear my in-laws' loud voices from inside, so I rushed in.
Hey! What are you doing to my parents?
When I hastily opened the living room door and said that, I saw my in-laws, looking thin and as ragged as ever. As soon as my father-in-law saw me, he tried to grab me, blaming me for everything. My dad stopped him. I told my mom we should call the police, but she hesitated.
"This is not the time to hesitate. Why haven't you called them?"
"Well, you see, before I called you, I called Mark."
"What?"
"I have a brother." When I heard that my mom had contacted him, I understood why she hesitated to call the police. My dad knew about it too and didn't want to escalate things. I accepted this and decided to deal with my in-laws for now. According to my in-laws, they borrowed money to pay the compensation to me and my company, but it wasn't enough. They borrowed more from relatives but couldn't repay it as promised, which led to disputes. As a result, they were cut off by all their relatives and had no one left to turn to. However, even after being disowned, their debts remained, leaving them in a very difficult situation. They concluded that the reason they ended up in this situation was ultimately because of me. However, since they couldn't reach me, they decided to hold my parents responsible. "This is clearly your own fault." I was utterly exasperated by their story, which had no part that warranted any sympathy. I realized that my in-laws, who told this story so brazenly, were beyond redemption. When I said this, my mother-in-law shouted, "Shut up," and then started crying. "If you want an apology, I'll give you one, so just return the money," she demanded. When I immediately refused, she began pounding the floor and wailing. Seeing this, my father sighed and my mother tilted her head in concern. "Are you really not gonna help people in need right in front of you? You heartless monsters," my father-in-law shouted, rubbing my mother-in-law's back. But his words had no effect, and we all sighed again. They had no right to talk about helping others when they were the ones causing trouble.
"You put so much burden on Sam and me, and now you expect help when you're in trouble? The audacity. Even if I could help, I wouldn't."
At that moment, "I'm home." I heard the front door open and my older brother's voice. Hearing his voice, my in-laws looked toward the entrance in shock. Seeing my mother-in-law's fake tears, I remained calm as my brother entered.
"Oh, so these are the people who troubled Lucy and Sam?"
My in-laws were silent as they saw my brother enter with a smile. He worked an outdoor job, so he was well-built and had a slightly intimidating face. "You're late. Please take them away." All right, my brother said, telling my in-laws to stand up. They were visibly nervous, not understanding what was happening.
"Who are you?"
"I'm Lucy's brother."
"Take us where?"
"I heard you're in financial trouble. I've got a job for you." Hearing those words, my in-laws turned pale and started to tremble. They were probably anxious about what kind of work they would be made to do.
No, thanks. It's fine. It's legitimate work. You're not in a position to be picky. Come on, let's go." I'm not going. I can't work."
You come here begging for money and then act all picky? That won't fly.
Eek!
Defeated by my brother's intimidation, they reluctantly followed him. "Is everything okay, Mark?" "No problem. See you later," my brother said as he took my in-laws away. When I heard that my brother was coming, I expected this outcome. Besides his outdoor job, my brother worked for a company that actively hired troubled individuals like my in-laws. The company was known for its strict approach, aiming to reform people from the ground up. The company also provides housing, but the buildings are decades old, and some rooms even have leaks when it rains. However, most people had nowhere else to go, so even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't. Many ended up working there in tears. I sighed and made some coffee. I made enough for my parents, and the three of us sat down to talk. "Well, his company is known for being strict, but they don't do anything unreasonable. A lot of people end up turning their lives around by working hard. It does sound scary, though." But considering everything they put Lucy and Sam through, this still feels too lenient. "Mom, you might be the scariest one here."
"Just realizing that now, Lucy."
Later, according to my brother, my in-laws are crying every day while working. On top of that, they were assigned to one of the worst rooms, which leaks when it rains. All their earnings go toward paying off their debt, leaving them just enough to scrape by. And it was through my brother that I first learned my father-in-law had a gambling problem. He would spend any money he had on gambling, which kept him perpetually broke. Now that he can't gamble, both in-laws are behaving themselves. As for me, the construction of my new house has finally begun, and I am looking forward to seeing it completed. Work is enjoyable, and I am living a smooth and happy life. Sometimes I feel lonely thinking about Sam, but whenever I talk to his altar, I feel like I can hear his responses, reminding me that I am not alone. Supported by friends, colleagues, and family, I am living happily every day. I ended up getting pregnant with Henry's child. I'll be taking the house and the car, just so you know. Out of the blue, Molly announced she was pregnant. And the father is Henry, of all people. I kind of saw it coming. I had thought that something like this might happen someday, but still, when faced with it, I find myself at a loss for words. What used to be a joyful dinner table has now turned into this. When did it all go wrong? Before me, Henry and Molly were laughing with their mouths wide open. Both of them seemed desperate to kick me out of the house. Well, I have plans of my own. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I laid the filled-out divorce papers in front of Henry. Henry and Molly looked surprised for a moment but quickly understood the situation and started to celebrate.
"This means we can." "Yeah, exactly."
They think they can enjoy this moment. I'll make sure they regret taking me for granted. With determination, I continued with what would be my last meal in this house. My name is Kelly. I'm a 27-year-old working part-time at a bookstore. I've been living a happy life with my husband, Henry. I met Henry when I was working at an IT company before. He joined the company as my subordinate. My first impression of Henry was that of a very polite and nice young man. At the same time, it made me want to work harder. Let's start with this task today.
All right.
Henry quickly learned anything I taught him, making him a rewarding person to teach. He not only managed tasks I initially struggled with without any problems, but also acted with consideration towards others. I was a little jealous of him, as he was so different from how I used to be. But, seeing Henry's sincerity up close, any feelings of jealousy gradually faded away. Henry, I really appreciate how hard you work all the time. I'm relying on you moving forward as well. Yes. But all of this is thanks to you, Kelly. I'm really grateful for everything. It's true that I rely on Henry. I never hid this fact and made sure to express my gratitude actively. However, Henry never boasted about it, always thanking me and acknowledging my help with his work. Watching him, I couldn't help but think what a good person he is. Whenever I praised him, Henry always responded with a pleased smile. A year after we started working together, Henry suddenly asked me out. Hey, Kelly, would you like to go out for dinner with me sometime? Dinner? Are you sure it's not just to discuss work? No, it's not about work. I just genuinely want to have dinner with you. Really? I never imagined Henry would ask me out for a meal. I was a bit surprised, but delighted at the prospect of dining with him. Thank you. I'm so happy. When do you want to go? Thank you. Let's see. A few days later. After work, we went to a pub near our office. We took our seats and relaxed for a moment. Henry seemed a bit more nervous than usual. Are you okay? Yes, I'm just a bit nervous, sorry. It was me who asked you out, after all. Saying this, Henry gave a troubled smile. Seeing his smile, I couldn't help but find it adorable. An hour later. After having a few drinks, the tension had eased. We talked about work and our personal lives, having conversations we normally couldn't. 2 hours after we sat down, we left the pub. The outdoor air seemed to sober Henry up, returning him to his usual self. Sorry, I got a bit drunk. Did I say anything weird? No, everything was fine. Hearing my words, Henry visibly relaxed. Watching him, it seems he might be a bit of a lightweight when it comes to alcohol. It's quite charming, really. As I was mulling over this, Henry looked straight at me and asked, Hey, would you like to go out for dinner with me again? There was no way I could refuse an invitation from Henry. Of course. And so, we started to have dinner together regularly. Eventually, our relationship evolved from being just colleagues to becoming lovers. Even after we started dating, Henry remained earnest and kind. He continued to excel at his job and became someone whom other employees relied upon. I can't count how many times I've been grateful that Henry was my subordinate. Then, after 2 years, Henry and I decided to get married. Kelly, would you marry me? Henry asked, his voice shaking with emotion. There was no reason for me to say no. Yes. To think I'd get to marry such a wonderful man. How lucky am I? Just imagining our future life together makes me smile. However, this euphoria was short-lived. Soon after, I found myself caught up in an unexpected and troublesome situation. Following our marriage, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. We lived in a beautiful apartment, sharing meals together. On Henry's days off, we'd go shopping at the nearby mall or take short trips for sightseeing. This life was exactly what I had envisioned. I never thought it would become reality. Hey, I'm off tomorrow. Is there anywhere you'd like to go? Could you take me to the supermarket nearby? Sure. Despite being tired from work, Henry would help out with household chores on his days off and after coming home. It would be a different story if we were both working, but since I've become a full-time homemaker, it felt wrong to have him help. You must be tired from work, let me take care of the chores. You rest. No, I want to help. I've told him several times that I wanted him to rest, but Henry insists on helping around the house. Eventually, I accepted it and we began doing chores together. As we got used to married life, I started working part-time at a nearby bookstore. I've always loved books, and customer service wasn't a burden for me. The staff was all very kind, making it the perfect workplace for me. Now that I had started working, I thought it'd be great if we could save up for a trip with Henry. Just as I was daydreaming about this while working one day, an event occurred that would drastically change our lives. After finishing my shift and doing some grocery shopping, I headed home. It was past 6 p.m. Henry probably hadn't returned home yet. With that thought, I leisurely made my way back. I'm exhausted. As soon as I entered the house in my usual manner, I felt something was off. But I quickly discovered what it was. I heard some unfamiliar voices. Who could be? I picked up the bag filled with groceries and cautiously proceeded to the living room. Gently opening the door, I saw Henry and an unknown woman sitting cozily on the sofa. What? I couldn't help but let out a loud exclamation. Who was this woman? Could Henry be cheating? My mind raced with various thoughts, and I began to panic. However, Henry quickly came over to me and introduced the woman. Sorry. Didn't mean to startle you. Well, this is Molly, my childhood friend. Sorry for the surprise. Childhood friend. Yeah. We've known each other since before kindergarten. The reason Molly had come to our house. She came over for dinner, it turns out. Apparently, Molly recently moved to this area. When she told Henry, he invited her over for a meal at our place. Initially, Molly declined, but after catching up and wanting to see Henry, she eventually accepted his invitation. Oh, I see. So, could you make dinner for 3? I don't mind, but I didn't buy enough groceries. I wonder if it'll be enough. I'm sorry. It's because I came over unexpectedly, isn't it? Oh, don't worry about it. It's fine. Hearing why Molly was here, I honestly thought Henry was being rather selfish. A heads up would have prevented all this frustration. Yet, it didn't feel right to send Molly away now. But the thought of going shopping again was bothersome. I rummaged through the kitchen drawers and fridge, trying to scrape together enough for 3. Fortunately, we had some leftover ingredients, so I managed to prepare a meal for 3. While I was cooking, Henry and Molly seemed lost in their own world on the sofa. I could hear them catching up and talking about why Molly moved. Though I was initially annoyed with Henry's actions, those feelings faded over time. If they're happy, that's all that matters, I guess. Dinner's ready, I announced after setting the table. But they were so engrossed in their conversation, they didn't notice. Hey, guys! Oh, sorry. Henry finally noticed after I called out a few times. He took Molly by the hand and led her to the dining table. Molly didn't seem to mind being led by the hand. Watching them, I felt a bit annoyed again. Was that really necessary? But I chose not to say anything. Wow, this looks delicious. Right? Molly complimented the meal, and Henry looked proud. Molly quickly finished her meal. A few minutes later, as Henry and I were about to clean up, Molly came over. Can I help with anything? Oh, no need. Don't worry about it. But I insisted on coming over unexpectedly. Well, if you insist, could you help with the dishes? I thought I'd get other chores done while she helped. Glancing at Molly's hands, I noticed her uncertain grasp on the task. She seemed inexperienced, making me instinctively offer help. Are you okay? Yes. I'm fine, she said with a smile and went back to washing. Well, stopping her now seemed wrong. So I let her continue and went back to my chores. Molly started coming over more frequently after that. Initially, I wasn't thrilled about my husband bringing a female childhood friend home, but as we shared meals, I began to understand more about her, and my displeasure faded. Molly started helping out with meals and chores almost every time she visited. Her skills in housework noticeably improved, which was pleasing to see, considering we're not much different in age. We had become good friends. Maybe this kind of life isn't so bad. One day, I noticed something odd about Molly. "Molly, could you help me clear these dishes?" I tried to engage her in cleanup, but her usual smile was absent. "I'm a bit tired today. Could you please do it?" "Oh, you're tired? All right," I responded as she turned back to the TV. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine," she assured, with Henry still by her side. Since Molly started visiting, the two of them enjoyed daily, friendly conversations and meals. Seeing them get along so well, given their childhood friendship, I never felt the need to intervene. Molly must be busy with work, I thought, as I began cleaning up by myself. But then, the next time and the time after that, Molly didn't offer to help at all. In fact, it seemed like her attitude had gotten worse. "Lately, Kelly's cooking's been kind of meh, hasn't it?" "Yeah, it's not really that good. It used to be better." They said this right in front of me without any remorse. What? Shoot. Did Kelly take that harder than we thought? But, I mean, it's true though. They said, and then started laughing loudly. This was the first time someone had directly criticized my cooking, and I felt more sad than angry. From that day on, Molly and Henry started making derogatory remarks about me. Molly kept coming over for meals, but, of course, stopped helping with any preparation or cleanup. It was as if Molly's true colors were starting to show. "Kelly kind of has a bland vibe, doesn't she? Why'd you marry her?" "Indeed. I've forgotten. Well, I don't have a shred of affection for her now anyway." That's terrible. Whenever I stepped away for a bit, they'd inevitably start bad-mouthing me. At first, it hurt, but then I got used to it. Is there anything sadder than getting used to being bad-mouthed? But, of course, I wasn't going to stay silent forever. "If you dislike me that much, then maybe you shouldn't come over anymore," I told Molly clearly. They were surprised since I usually just went along with whatever they said. They froze for a moment at my words, but it was only for a moment. "What, all of a sudden?" "It's all just jokes, obviously." "Yeah. Just joking." "Really, thank you for everything, Kelly," they said, their words dripping with sarcasm. "I find that hard to believe." "No, really, it's true." "Right, Molly?" "Yeah. After all, we're always imposing on you," they continued, their insincerity evident. No matter how many times I addressed it, their attitudes never changed. I even considered divorce. But then there was Henry's persuasion, the preparations for divorce, and whether the divorce talks would progress at all. When it came down to it, various obstacles made it difficult to take that first step. To Henry and Molly, I must have seemed like a very convenient woman. As I stopped admonishing them, they only became more brazen. "Hey, I'm going out with Molly today." "Just the two of you?" "Yeah." "So?" "I mean, even if you're childhood friends, you're married. I'm not really comfortable with that." "It's fine because we're just friends. Nothing weird about it." "Oh, I'll bring you back a souvenir." "What do you want?" No matter how much I asked them not to go out alone together, Henry wouldn't listen, dismissing my concerns with promises of souvenirs and assurances that nothing inappropriate would happen because they were just friends. "I don't care about souvenirs. I want you to stop going out alone together." When I got angry, Henry's demeanor suddenly changed. "I told you, we're not doing anything wrong. What's your problem? This is unbelievable." "Fine, I won't come home tonight." "What? Wait a minute." Henry stormed out and didn't come home that day. He probably stayed at Molly's. Seeing Henry prioritize Molly over me made my feelings for him grow colder. When did Henry change so much? Or perhaps he was just showing his true self. The more I thought about it, the more I felt deceived and utterly miserable. Then one day, out of the blue, Henry said something unexpected. "Hey, how about we start thinking about having kids?" "Kids?" "Yeah. Life's been settling down, after all." But I couldn't agree.
I don't think it's possible anymore. Why? We're still young enough, and we have the money. It's a matter of the heart. I can't see it working out when you always prioritize Molly over everything else. Wanting kids is one thing, but raising them is another. I couldn't imagine having and raising children with someone who would always put Molly first, no matter what. But my resistance seemed to annoy him. What? You think you have the right to refuse? I'm saying I want a child with you. That's exactly the problem. Would you do the same to our child? Leave all the childcare to me while you go off to Molly? Henry raised his voice even more, hitting the nail on the head. Shut up. Whatever I do, it's none of your business. If we take his words at face value, it means he intended to leave all the childcare responsibilities to me even if we had a child. That just reinforced my decision not to have children with him. Eventually, my continuous refusal seemed to make Henry give up on the idea of having kids. I thought he finally understood. But my assumption was about to be proven drastically wrong. A few months later, as usual, Molly came over for dinner. I was reluctant, but not serving dinner would only lead to more trouble. They kept criticizing my cooking as always. I thought, if they didn't like it, they shouldn't come over. But I guessed they would finish everything despite their complaints. That thought was interrupted when Molly suddenly put down her chopsticks with a smile. Hey, can I say it? Yeah, go ahead. Say what? I was tense, wondering what she was about to say. Then, Molly dropped a bombshell. I'm pregnant with Henry's child. The infertile one should get a divorce and leave. I'll take the house and the car. I couldn't believe my ears. But at the same time, a feeling of I knew it emerged. Seeing them together daily, I could somehow accept it. I had thought something like this might happen someday, but still, being faced with it, I was at a loss for words. And to be called infertile. Henry must have told Molly something to that effect, since I refused to have children with him. After that, Henry and Molly only had unbelievable things to say to me. Now that they were having a child, I had become an inconvenience. Well, I had my own plans. Fine, here's the divorce papers. I pulled out the pre-filled divorce papers I had stored in a drawer. I had prepared them when divorce had crossed my mind. Never thought I'd actually use them. But this seemed like a good opportunity. Feeling no need to hold Henry back, I told them to sign the papers. Initially, they were confused, but gradually smiles spread across their faces. This means we can. Yeah, exactly. Henry casually grabbed a pen nearby and signed his part. Here you go. This means we're divorced. Good luck to you both. They must be imagining their future life together. But such thoughts could only occupy my mind for so long. I began preparing to leave the house, thinking about what I needed to do next. I definitely need to take this with me. I pulled out a notebook hidden at the back of my desk. It was a diary where I had written about my daily life, work, and the things Henry and Molly did. It was just a hobby, but who knew it might come in handy. I flipped through it to make sure it was all there. Then tucked it into my bag. Luckily, I found a weekly apartment I could move into right away, so I left the day after Molly told me about her pregnancy. Finally leaving, huh? Hurry up and leave. Molly had stayed over after dinner. Probably planning to live in this house from now on. I wondered what would happen to her previous residence, but realized it was a pointless thought. All right, you two be happy together. With that, I left the house. I immediately started looking for a new place to live. I found a new apartment quickly and started preparing to move in. But finding a lawyer wasn't so easy. I feared Henry and Molly might get away with everything. Letting them get away without doing anything would be too regrettable. But if something can't be found, there's nothing that can be done about it. It was devastating to think about it. But then, I came across a lawyer named Carlos. Something about him made me think he might be able to help. I dialed his number and was greeted by a friendly male voice. Then, I was immediately greeted by a friendly male voice.
We arranged a meeting and ended the call. Somehow, I felt he could make a difference. This intuition would soon prove to be correct. Carlos listened to my story with great empathy. Having not confided in anyone until now, the kindness felt deeply moving. Clearly, Carlos was the only choice. I decided to rely on Carlos Brown. Afterward, to arrange a discussion about compensation, I asked him to prepare a formal notice for Henry and Molly. Addressed to Henry West and Molly Brown. Carlos seemed to somehow know the two. Do you know them? Well, Molly is actually my sister. Sister! I had noticed they shared the same last name, but never imagined they were siblings. That meant it made sense that he knew Henry, who was a childhood friend. Is it okay to take action against your sister? Yes, of course. She's the one who did wrong, so she needs to properly reflect on her actions, Carlos said with a troubled smile. 2 weeks after receiving Molly's pregnancy news, I had moved into my new place and was taking a moment to breathe when my phone rang. It was from Henry. Probably about the formal notice arriving. I figured he would say something like, "What's this about?" or "We're already divorced, so don't bother me." Feeling it was a hassle, I didn't answer. A few seconds later, the call ended. But then it rang again immediately. Ignoring it only led to more calls, so I decided to pick up. Hello? Hey! What's this about a formal notice? Are you kidding me? Why are you calling repeatedly? It's annoying. What? Annoying? You started this with your weird actions. Send me this notice after we're divorced, telling me not to get involved. I couldn't help but laugh at the predictability of his response. What are you laughing at? I just find it amusing. Make sure you read what's in the notice carefully. Why? You can run, but I'll find you no matter what. You two need to seriously reflect on your actions. Reflect? Weren't you okay with it? You even congratulated us when Molly said she was pregnant. What? Did you not understand that it was just politeness? If I made a fuss, it would just cause trouble. You two get angry too quickly to have a rational conversation. What did you say? Henry was furious on the other end of the line, but I wasn't scared since it was just a phone call. Well, that's it. Make sure you don't ignore the notice. I emphasized this point and then hung up. The calls stopped after a few more attempts. 2 weeks later, the day to resolve everything arrived. I had warned them not to ignore the notice, but would they really come? I felt slightly anxious, but just over 5 minutes past the appointed time. The door opened. Henry and Molly entered the room with tense expressions. Carlos, sitting next to me, glared at them. Glad you two could make it. Why is my brother here? Kelly, did you do this on purpose? Finding my brother to represent you is just in bad taste. It was purely coincidental that I asked Carlos for help. And I didn't even know he was your brother. Molly fell silent at my rebuttal. So, what's this about? Sending weird documents. Kelly and I are divorced. We're strangers now. Indeed, strangers. But Kelly has been treated terribly by you two. For what? Whether they genuinely didn't understand or were playing dumb. Their arrogance was too much considering their position. For the damages. What are you talking about? Are you saying it didn't happen? Then why is Molly pregnant? Carlos interjected as Henry tried to obscure the issue. That happened after we divorced. And how do you even know about that? I heard it from Kelly. Why do you keep lying? Initially, the divorce happened because Molly got pregnant, right? And since the pregnancy was discovered before the divorce, it's clear you two were involved while still married to Kelly. If you continue to lie, we can always contact the hospital. Carlos's words carried a slight threat. But without going that far, the two would surely continue to lie. Those words likely came from knowing Henry and Molly for so long. But you know all this? Thanks to Kelly's diary, We know exactly what you two have been up to.
A diary?
Yes. Since you married Henry and Molly started coming over, all the things they did that bothered you. You wrote it all down. Hearing Carlos's words, Henry and Molly glared at me. But if they hadn't done what they did, none of this would have happened. I'm not troubled by their glare.
What, am I the bad one here?
Yes, you are. If you were more capable in cooking and cleaning, and more attractive, I wouldn't have had to turn to Molly. It's all your fault for being inadequate. Kelly lost to me. Despite the presence of a lawyer, Henry and Molly continued with their nonsensical talk. The pregnancy was the tipping point, but I realized it was good that I divorced Henry. Still, my mind couldn't fully grasp the situation. What are these two even saying? Do they truly believe they've done nothing wrong? The more I listened, the more confused I became. Then Carlos spoke up again.
Hey! Enough already! What's with all this nonsense you've been saying?
But.
It's not about but. What do you mean she's not good at cleaning, not attractive? Saying Kelly lost to you, what kind of attitude is that? Truly disrespectful.
It's the truth. What's wrong with saying that?
The truth? Could you say that in front of Kelly's parents? In front of a judge? A judge? Why would a judge come into this?
If you keep up this nonsense and don't pay the compensation, we'll end up in court. It's fine by me and Kelly, but you two will be at a disadvantage. The compensation could end up being much more than what's being asked now, plus you'll have court fees. If you think you have a chance of winning, I get why you'd resist, but continuing this way is frankly idiotic. Carlos, while angry, made sure to speak calmly to them. Plus, if it goes to court, it'll get out. You might have to leave your jobs. Is that what you want? Hearing the word court seemed to scare Henry and Molly. Their bravado vanished.
Court? It'll get out at work?
Yes.
Even at my workplace?
Of course. Realizing they had no way out, they both slumped, defeated. Then, after a pause, Henry spoke.
Sorry, Kelly. We were wrong.
Molly followed with her apology. Truly sorry. Are you reflecting?
Yes, we are. Truly sorry.
They both apologized again, slightly bowing their heads. Their words of apology were good to hear, but were they truly reflecting on what they did wrong? Do you really mean that?
Yes, we do.
Then let's conclude this with a compensation agreement. Right. Please read this document. Knowing they hadn't really reflected, I accepted their apology to end the conversation. I hadn't acted thoughtlessly.
What? Compensation? Why? Why do we have to pay?
Exactly what I wanted to see. They probably thought their apology would make everything okay. Thinking an apology was enough to end all this was naive.
Why?
What do you mean?
We apologized. Why do we still have to? That's right. We're not paying any compensation.
Their previously meek attitude disappeared, and their arrogance returned. Clearly, they hadn't reflected at all. Have you never heard that if apologies were enough, we wouldn't need police? Even if you apologize, some things can't be forgiven. What the victim, me, wants isn't an apology but compensation. Understand? Henry's expression changed suddenly. He realized I was serious about the compensation.
But you know we don't have that kind of money. There's rent, car loans, and now a child on the way. We'll need even more money.
That's not my problem. We're strangers now. Why should I, a stranger, worry about you? You need money because you're having a child? It's absurd to come to me with that after everything you've done.
No way.
Seeing I wouldn't budge, Henry's face turned pale.
Really the worst. Why do you want to take our money so badly? I don't get it.
Who's the worst here? Kelly hasn't done anything wrong. You harassed her, decided you wanted a child, and made one. And now you're saying this is Kelly's fault? Please, enough with the jokes.
But, as I said before, continuing to throw tantrums will only lead you to court. If it goes to trial, you'll end up needing a significantly larger amount of money. Excuses won't work then," Carlos said, taking a moment before continuing. "Moreover, continuing this way might lead to you losing social credibility. It could become neighborhood gossip or even reach your parents' ears. Are you okay with everyone knowing you were sued for an affair?" I'd be mortified. Hearing Carlos's speech, Henry and Molly seemed to finally understand their situation. Did they want to maintain a good image? Perhaps they didn't want their misdeeds to be known by others. If you still want to argue after hearing all this, sorry. Really sorry. We'll pay the demanded compensation. Just please, no court. We don't want to upset our parents. They were already causing enough distress. So, you'll pay quietly? Yes. We'll pay. So please, don't raise the amount. And what about you, Molly? I'll pay too. Properly. I'm sorry, I was out of line. Their apologies seemed hollow, but it was better they realized their actions sooner. They looked defeated on the couch. Agreeing to pay the compensation amount suggested, "I also want to apologize. I'm really sorry for everything." "No need," I quickly reassured him, grateful for his help. "If there's anything else, don't hesitate to reach out." "Thank you so much." After a brief chat with Carlos, I headed home, feeling reassured by his reliable presence. Half a year after the divorce, I'm living comfortably alone in my new home, continuing my part-time job at the bookstore, surrounded daily by things I love. After the confrontation with Henry and Molly, I don't know what became of them. Whether they stayed in that house, got married, or how they're managing with a child, I'm not sure. But honestly, their fate doesn't concern me. They must be managing somehow. I hope they're reflecting on how terrible their actions were, but since we'll never interact again, it doesn't really matter. From now on, I want to live for myself, doing what I want and living life my way. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. Checking my schedule for tomorrow, I sip my favorite tea. "Are you okay, Emily? You look a bit off." "Don't worry about it. It's nothing." Becoming a fifth grader and entering her rebellious phase, my daughter recently started to overtly distance herself from my husband. He seemed displeased with this situation, but it's just a phase. We decided to let her be, convincing ourselves to maintain our family dynamic. However, a few days later, the daughter who had been avoiding her father and showing a rebellious attitude suddenly said she wanted to sleep with him. As I was puzzled by our daughter's sudden change, my husband said with a smug grin, "It seems she had a bad dream last night. Scared to sleep alone, huh? She's still a kid after all." He appeared overly pleased yet with an odd smile, clearly delighted to be relied upon by his daughter. Contrary to my buoyant husband, however, something seemed off about our daughter. The morning after she slept with her father, she would always look spaced out, and her pajamas would be unusually disheveled, with buttons undone and strange wrinkles. What could be happening to her? But since she insists she's fine, I can't meddle too much, and I've been anxiously passing the days. Then one day, I was suddenly called in by her elementary school and was asked a surprising question by the school nurse. "Your daughter seems to be under a lot of stress. Has anything changed at home recently?" After that, my husband started acting strangely. He turned pale, sweating profusely, clenching his fists, and his gaze darting around restlessly. Seeing my husband like this momentarily took my worry for my daughter away as I asked, "What's wrong with you?" "It's nothing. Oh, I just remembered something urgent. I need to step out for a bit." He tried to flee the scene in a hurry. Clearly, something was suspicious. He must know something. Intuitively feeling this, I grabbed his wrist. "Hold on. What's so urgent? More important than something about Emily?" Pressed by my tone, he froze in his tracks, intending to leave.
And then, the shocking revelation he eventually shared. My name is Michelle. I'm a 39-year-old housewife, living with my husband John and our daughter Emily. Though I might be biased as a parent, my daughter is quite beautiful and cute. We've been living happily together as a family of 3, without wanting for anything. Recently, my daughter has begun to show a rebellious attitude, possibly due to hitting puberty. She hasn't changed much towards me, a fellow female, just becoming a bit cheekier. She still talks to me about her day as before. However, her attitude towards her father has noticeably changed. Today, at school. I'm home.
Emily, what were you and Mom talking about?
It's none of your business, Dad. I was talking to Mom.
Come on, that's cold. You can talk to Dad too. We're a family, aren't we?
No. Go away, Dad.
Even when her father tried to engage her, she would reject him or not respond, and on particularly bad days, she would even ignore him. Emily's been really cold to me lately, don't you think? Could you talk to her for me? She's been pushing back on me too. It's probably just a phase. Girls can be really against their fathers at this age. We should just watch over her quietly.
While it's great to see her grow, as a father, he's clearly frustrated by being treated coldly by his adorable daughter. But anything I could say might just make her more rebellious. Thinking this, I hesitated to intervene, and the distance between my husband and daughter grew day by day. Then, on a certain holiday, when I returned home from grocery shopping for dinner, the atmosphere between my husband and daughter in the living room was more tense than usual.
I'm home. What's going on with you two?
It's nothing. My daughter muttered sulkily, looking down, while my husband also remained silent, awkwardly turning away. Surely, he must have pestered her as usual and spoiled her mood. Thinking it best not to meddle clumsily, I simply replied, "Really?" and headed to the kitchen to put away the groceries in the fridge. After all, they are family, even if things are a bit strained. I figured their relationship hadn't deteriorated to the point where they couldn't talk it out, and somehow, they'd make up on their own. But, observing from the kitchen for a while, my expectations were way off. Emily went back to her room without saying anything further. Surprised by her behavior, which was unlike her, I confronted John.
Hey, what happened? It's not like Emily to act that way.
But John, as usual, avoided my gaze.
I don't know. She just got in a mood on her own.
Even so, her behavior was unusually off. Emily doesn't usually retreat to her room without saying anything. There must be something between her and John that they're hiding.
Are you sure there's nothing you're aware of?
Almost certain John had done something. I pressed him further, but all I got was a persistent "I don't know" no matter how many times I asked. Reluctant to question Emily about what was going on, I grew increasingly anxious about the uneasy atmosphere at home. However, the next day, I witnessed something even more perplexing. Somehow, John and Emily ended up sleeping in the same bed. Originally, John and I shared a room, and Emily had her own, but since that day, there were occasional mornings I'd find Emily in John's bed. I wondered what had gotten into Emily after all her avoidance. As I puzzled over Emily's sudden change to John, with a smug grin, said,
"Seems like she had a nightmare last night. She crawled into my bed saying she wanted to sleep together." Oh, still such a child.
John, proud yet with a somewhat unsettling smile, seemed overjoyed to be needed by Emily. But, contrary to my elated husband, something was off with Emily. Since then, Emily started sleeping with John every few days, and on those mornings, she always seemed out of it. Moreover, her pajamas were disheveled, with buttons undone and strange wrinkles. Emily used to be the type to wake up bright and early, but now she seemed dazed and somehow pained. What on earth was going on?
Emily, are you okay? You seem off on the mornings you sleep in Dad's bed.
When I expressed my concern, Emily forced a clumsy smile and said, "I'm fine.
Don't worry about it. It's nothing."
Though she clearly seemed to be forcing it, since she insisted she was fine, I couldn't pry too much. Worried yet perplexed by my daughter's changes, I thought it best to keep watching over her. Several weeks passed in this state. Finally, I came to know what had been happening to Emily. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I received a call from the school nurse at Emily's school.
Your daughter is in a serious situation. Could you come to the school so we can discuss the details?
The nurse's grave tone made my heart sink. What could have happened to Emily? Had she been seriously injured? Was she all right? Driven by anxiety, I rushed to the elementary school. Upon arrival, I was shown to a reception room, and soon after, the nurse who had called me came in. Looking around anxiously for Emily and not seeing her, the nurse said, "Please, calm down.
I'm sorry for calling you out of the blue. Your daughter is currently sleeping in the infirmary. It seemed like she was under a lot of stress, so we wanted to ask about her situation at home."
Stress?
What do you mean?
The words from the nurse were so unexpected, I had to ask again. The nurse explained patiently. It seems Emily had gone to the infirmary to change because a button on her uniform had popped off while getting ready for gym class. When she took off her clothes, the nurse discovered she had a widespread case of shingles on her back. Shingles are often caused by stress or fatigue. That's when the nurse asked her,
"Emily, have you been going through something unpleasant? Like, are you pushing yourself too hard on something?"
At that point, Emily suddenly started crying. Crying uncontrollably as if a dam had broken, the nurse couldn't ask any more and instead contacted me, knowing I'd be aware of the home situation.
It doesn't have to be anything major. Have you noticed any changes in Emily's behavior recently?
She asked me with a serious expression, looking me straight in the eye. As I recounted my daughter's recent behavior, I responded,
"I think she might have entered a rebellious phase. Her attitude towards my husband and me has changed compared to before. I'm not sure to what extent that has stressed her out, though."
While recalling recent changes in Emily, I realized something that concerned me.
"Oh, I've noticed that Emily seems to have suddenly gained weight. Her food intake hasn't changed, and her snacking is normal, I believe."
I had felt that Emily, who was always of a standard build, had suddenly started to look chubbier. However, as I told the school nurse, there hadn't been any significant changes in her eating habits, nor had her snacking increased unusually. Yet, the visible change in her physique over a short period made me suddenly worried that something not good might be happening to her. While I had noticed and been concerned about her change in physique, I hadn't at all noticed that she had developed shingles. I had experienced this disease myself once before, and it was quite painful. The guilt of not noticing my daughter's discomfort weighed on me. As I was led to the infirmary and then took her home. Emily seemed a bit better after resting in the infirmary, not looking too pale. However, she kept a gloomy expression, looking down the entire time, and wouldn't even look me in the eye properly. Unable to say anything to her, we returned home in silence. Upon arriving home, my husband, John, had already finished work and was back. "Hey, welcome back," he said, turning towards us from the sofa, his demeanor as usual. But the moment Emily saw John, she made a face as if she'd seen something dreadful and retreated to her room without a word. I felt something was wrong. Emily had avoided John before. But she had never shown such blatant aversion and disgust. Could it be that John was the cause of Emily's stress? Contrary to my deep concerns, John casually asked, "You're back late. Anything happen?" His tone didn't seem worried about Emily, just making conversation. Feeling a bit irritated with him, I simply responded,
"Actually, I was called by Emily's school nurse this afternoon and went to pick her up."
I then explained everything that happened today, about the widespread shingles on Emily's body, how she started crying when I tried to ask her about it, making it impossible to continue, and how she seemed to have gained weight recently. My concern for Emily grew as I spoke, and my gaze gradually fell.
"The nurse thinks she might be dealing with some significant stress. Do you have any idea what it could be about?"
Hoping John might know something I hadn't noticed, I looked up at him only to be shocked by his appearance. He had gone pale, was sweating profusely, and clenching his fists. His reaction made me momentarily forget my worries for Emily.
"What's wrong? Are you okay? You suddenly look so pale."
"It's nothing. Oh, I just remembered I have an urgent errand, gotta step out for a bit,"
John stammered, attempting to flee the living room. His panic struck me as suspicious the moment I mentioned Emily. His panic was so extreme that it only heightened my suspicions and sense of unease. Feeling a surge of suspicion, I instinctively grabbed his wrist as he tried to leave.
"Wait a minute. What errand could possibly be more important than Emily suffering like this?"
Overwhelmed by my tone, John froze. Fear evident in his eyes, confirming my suspicion that he knew something. Just as I was about to press him further, Emily burst into the living room. Her face distorted with anger and tears streaming down her face.
"I hated sleeping in the same bed as Dad. But he said if I didn't, he would do something terrible to you, Mom, so I couldn't refuse. I tried to bear it, but then my body started itching and hurting so much."
Through her sobs, Emily desperately shared her ordeal. Finally, John's true nature was exposed. John reluctantly began to tell the story. It seems that a coworker of his, who also has a child Emily's age, frequently boasted about their great parent-child relationship. Feeling jealous and frustrated with Emily's avoidance during her rebellious phase, John wanted to create a situation where he and Emily appeared close. His solution was to have Emily sleep in the same bed as him. However, Emily, forced by John's threats, was far from sleeping peacefully due to itching and pain all over her body. Fearing that leaving the bed might result in me being harmed, Emily tried to endure the discomfort, tossing and turning all night. The disheveled pajamas and her grogginess the following morning were due to the restless night, not sleeping well. Understandably, this situation caused her stress. Emily had been sneaking food from the fridge at night to cope with her stress. Her recent weight gain was also due to John's actions.
"I thought if I just endured it, Mom wouldn't have to suffer, but the itchiness got worse, I was sleepy and irritable. I didn't know what to do anymore."
Moved by her distress, I hugged her tightly. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? My daughter had been making such sacrifices to protect me. Meanwhile, John was shaking for another reason.
"To spill everything like this, what have you done?" "No, Michelle, it's not what you think. I didn't threaten Emily in any way,"
John said, clearly flustered and pale-faced. Seeing John still trying to deny his actions infuriated me.
"Don't play games. You're saying Emily is lying? Her suffering is evident. The fact that she's under such stress is proof enough."
I shouted, my anger unabated, as John muttered excuses, looking away.
"I just wanted to get along with Emily. I had no idea she was feeling so stressed." "To force her into compliance with your threats and then say that? I'm appalled. You have no right to call yourself Emily's father. We're getting a divorce." Being with someone who used threats to fulfill his own desires at the expense of his daughter, especially when those threats involved me, was unthinkable. I must not be of much importance to him, I realized. With that thought, I initiated the conversation about divorce with my husband. John began to protest in panic, but I was unyielding. "Hey, listen to me. I admit I was wrong. I'll make amends. Please, let's not talk about divorce."
My patience completely wore thin with my husband's pathetic clinging.
"To want to satisfy yourself by threatening your own daughter to bend her to your will, I'm better off without you. Your presence is detrimental to Emily's growth. If you refuse to accept the divorce, I'll report you to the police. And of course, I'll inform your parents as well."
With a firm stance, I said this, and my husband just collapsed, weakened and defeated. Not long after that incident, our divorce was finalized smoothly. Perhaps because he lacked close relationships at work or in the neighborhood, my husband began to feel a profound loneliness after the divorce. He didn't know what he was working for anymore, he was just lonely. That was entirely his own doing. I felt no sympathy for him. Eventually, he couldn't focus on his job and ended up resigning. Abandoned by his daughter and me, and losing his job, he finally seemed to recognize his mistake. Sometime after our divorce, he called, wanting to reconcile.
Michelle, Emily, I was truly in the wrong before. I forced Emily to pretend we were a close family, and I'm sincerely regretful now. Can you give me another chance? I want to be a proper family with you both this time.
His appeals of regret are too little, too late. Both my daughter and I have long since emotionally distanced ourselves from him. His desperate clinging did nothing to sway me.
I'm sorry, but I can no longer trust you. I'd prefer if you didn't contact us again.
John persisted for a while but eventually realized his efforts were futile and gave up. With a voice filled with resignation, he bid farewell and the call ended. After the divorce, Emily and I moved to my parents' house. Located in a quiet countryside, hours away from where John and I lived. Whether it was the physical distance from John or the severance of parental ties, Emily's condition gradually improved. Her shingles healed, her weight normalized. And she began to sleep soundly, smiling and enjoying her days. In a tranquil environment, free from any threats, we began a new life of peace and well-being.